We are a land of many faiths, and we are singing, we're singing for our lives. We are...
Thank you, Rabbi Guto, for those powerful words. And now, welcome Reverend William Sinkford, who will lead us forth with a sense of commitment and conviction.
Thank you all for being here today. This is a critical witness that we are making for our nation. Today, we join together as people of faith, calling for the simple truth about U.S.-sponsored torture. We urge our elected representatives to create an independent, nonpartisan commission of inquiry into our nation's perpetration of torture since 9/11. We have not only a right, but we have the responsibility to know what has been done in our names. Learning the full extent of U.S.-sponsored torture will most probably be disturbing. We will hear stories of violence, of degradation, and of pain. Some people will say that it's simply too upsetting to explore this very real recent history. But we cannot undo the past by turning our backs on it. Only by learning our full history can we begin to atone for our country's conduct and create safeguards to ensure that this history is never, ever repeated. Reconciliation is only possible after the truth has been told, and the only way forward is through our past. A commission of inquiry will not only reveal our history, but also move this country into a conversation about our most fundamental values. We all need to understand that public opinion is still deeply divided on the use of torture. We folks of faith, we religious leaders, have our work to do with our flocks. Because only when everyone understands the damage that torture inflicts on the whole human family will there come a moral consensus. Our work as religious people must continue until we have a full understanding of our history and a national consensus that torture is wrong. As Dr. Martin Luther King said, when the church is doing its job, it is serving as a moral beacon for society. Our religious communities need to be that beacon now, standing up for the truth and for the basic human rights of all God's children. I call on all of you to urge our leaders to take the courageous but necessary step to reveal the truth. Will you join with this group of religious leaders and raise your voice? Will you raise your voice? Yes. Will you urge our leaders to trust us enough to hear the truth? Yes. Will you join with us? Will you raise your voice? Let's move forth in unanimity. This is too important for us to be silent. Yes.
Thank you very much, Bill. You have heard the call, and the good news is that we are not alone. You are a beautiful crowd of people. Some of our traditions describe the great cloud of witnesses, and perhaps we represent that today. In addition to the people who have spoken from the podium, there are a number of other national religious leaders from here in Washington and across the country who have gathered with us today. And I want to tell you who they are, both to honor their presence and their commitment, and also to remind us of the amazing breadth and depth of religious commitment crossing the spectrum of many divisions and diversities that have gathered together in the unanimity to which Bill has called us. So let me read their names, and they can wave from wherever they are in the crowd. Scott Anderson, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Council of Churches. The Reverend Ed Bacon, the rector of All Saints Episcopal Church in Pasadena, California. The Reverend Holly Beaumont, legislative advocate for the New Mexico Conference of Churches. The Reverend Spencer Bradford, program associate for peace of the North Carolina Council of Churches. The Reverend Ken Brooker Langston, director of Disciples Justice Action Network. The Reverend Daniel Bryant, past president of the Board of Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon. The Reverend Peg Chamberlain, executive director of the Minnesota Council of Churches. The Reverend Dr. George Hunsiger, the founder of National Religious Campaign Against Torture. Let's say a word of thanks to Dr. Hunsiger. Rabbi Rachel Kahn Troster, the Direction of Education and Outreach of Rabbis for Human Rights in North America. Arthur Larrabee, General Secretary of the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting of the Religious Society of Friends. The Reverend Steve Martin, Executive Vice President of Evangelicals for Human Rights. The Reverend Marilyn Meacham, Executive Director of Interchurch Ministries of Nebraska. The Reverend Jack Moline, Director of Public Policy for the Rabbinical Assembly of Washington, D.C. Michael Neuroth, the Policy Advocate for International Issues of the United Church of Christ Public Policy Office in Washington. Sister Diana Ortiz, founder of the Torture Abolition and Survivor Support Coalition in Washington. Mark Palavin, the Deputy Director of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. The Reverend Ali Perry, Vice President, the National Religious Campaign Against Torture. Maureen Shea, Director of Government Relations of the Episcopal Church. Eric C. Smith, the Associate Director of the Maine Council of Churches. Reverend Dennis Sparks, the Executive Director, West Virginia Council of Churches. Dr. Saeed Saeed, the National Director of Interfaith and Community Alliances of the Islamic Society of North America. Reverend James Winkler, the General Secretary of the General Board of Church and Society of the United Methodist Church. And let me ask all whose names have been read to say thank you to all of you who are here whose names have not been read. We're grateful for your presence and your encouragement. 1 year ago, I had the privilege of visiting church partners in Argentina and in Chile. I sat in a room of a human rights group in Argentina, surrounded by the files of the disappeared, still seeking justice. I visited with the grandmothers of La Plaza de Mayo, who are still searching for their grandchildren, the children of their disappeared children. And I visited La Villa Grimaldi, a torture center in Santiago, Chile, and took a tour of that memorial from a man who had been tortured there. And in each place, the question was asked, why? Why is the United States embarked in this horrible journey? And what are you going to do about it? Let this gathering today, let our call for a commission of inquiry be the answer to their question and the question of many others. And let us go forth with courage and with joy, knowing that we are not alone.
Let's